First of all, thanks for being here. I know there's a couple other super interesting conversations happening or presentations happening, so I'm very glad that we have almost a full room. Also, thanks to the organization for having me here today. It's the first time that I speak in Vienna, so I'm very glad to be here. Quick introduction of myself. I'm Jorge Ramos. As you can tell by the name, I'm from Spain, born and raised. Also, one of the main reasons why I'm not doing this in German. It would be fun if I tried. Not, it would be not. And I work for Zalando. I'll start with one warning and two questions. First, the warning. I speak very fast. You stop me, okay? If you want to ask questions, if there's something that is not clear, you would like to go deeper, you don't need to wait till the end. You can always stop me like, raise your hand, stop me, and I'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you guys. And then the two questions. Does anybody not know what Zalando does? Raise your hand. Fine, then I don't need to talk about it. Great, I don't like it. And then the second question, actually, I will use to start my presentation, which is, she's Beth Ditto. This is the image of one of our latest marketing campaigns. Singer, songwriter, pretty cool. If you don't know her, check it out. But then my question is, how many of you, or how many of your companies have ever thought about this kind of dichotomy? What's best, having a centralized analytics team or having a decentralized analytics team? Is that a discussion that happens in your companies? Can you please raise your hands? Okay, a fair amount. That's great. I always think like, maybe this is only interesting for the bigger companies that have like a lot of people and so on. But I think that's also a valid question in middle-sized and smaller companies as well. So this is the kind of the main idea behind the presentation of today. So what's best? What's the best structure for an analytics team in order to give information, give data to all the stakeholders and to make our company, make our business even better than it is? And then we started with like her. She was like, what should we do? What should we do? Centralized or decentralized? Just to give you a bit of context, this is what Zalando looks right now. This is no insider information. You can find all this information at our corporate website, so I'm fine with this, with the law. The orange numbers are these vanity metrics that we talk about, not so relevant, but I think what is very interesting is to know that at Zalando we have more than 250 people working in analytics. That means digital analytics, but also means data science, means more like marketing, some parts of marketing. We have around 600 users, more than 600 users of Google Analytics and BigQuery at the moment. That's a bunch of people, really a lot. We're active across 15 markets, so that means that all the functions that we have are repeated 15 times. I mean, not like that, but potentially we could get the same question 15 times for the 15 different markets. We'll be live in 2 more markets soon. And also, so you get an idea of the scale, we generate around 30 billion Google Analytics hits per month, right? I think that's the number. So it's big, we're big. You know that, right? Oh, one number that's also important. We are around 15,000 employees in Europe. From these 15,000, I'll be fair, 10,000 of them work in the logistics and fulfillment centers. So it's not that all 15,000 people are asking me for data. It's not. But around 4,000, yes. So 4,000 or 5,000 are very interested in the data that we have. So after giving you some context, I'll show you how or what the analytics structure looked like like a year and a half ago, more or less. Also to say something, this is my presentation is mostly about on-site analytics. So Zalando is quite complex. We have a lot of division in the functions, and then we have on-site analytics, we have marketing analytics, we have data science, we have pricing analytics, a bunch of things, customer analytics. So there's a lot of different departments. I'm focusing on on-site analytics, which is the one where I work. And this is more or less the structure that we had as a result of the natural evolution of the company, right? So we started 10 years ago, rather small, and things changed, of course, but not radically. So in a nutshell, there was like one team giving data, giving information to everybody, up to more than 35 different stakeholder teams. And that included like product teams, marketing teams, the senior management, of course, category management, different ventures. Maybe you heard of Zalon or the Zalando Lounge or stuff like that. They also get data from us. The 15 markets, as I was mentioning, and so on. So that, as you can imagine, created massive bottlenecks. So So all those people asking a team of barely 25 people for data, we were like continuously, okay, we're late. And it's like, okay, ask for your data like 3 weeks in advance, otherwise we won't have it on time. But of course, that's not something that you can request to your stakeholders, because when they have a need, they have a need. They cannot wait for 3 weeks. And there's this saying, I think it's a quote, but I don't remember who said that. And it's like, if you wait 2 weeks to answer a question, at some point you stop asking questions and you just go with your gut. And it's not that was happening a lot, but it was happening. And some decisions were made just based on like, well, I have no data, so I really think this is the best. And let's go with that, which is something that nobody likes and nobody wants in the company. So what did we do to solve this situation? The very first thing we did was actually to adopt the Google Analytics 360 suite. I mean, it's not the only reason why we adopted it. There are other reasons, of course. But so before Google Analytics, what we had was another German vendor, I won't name it, which actually in the end was a very good tool, very powerful, but the UI wasn't very welcoming, let's say. And the learning curve of that tool was very, very steep. So our stakeholders had the perfect excuse not to learn it. Like, that's too hard. I don't want to learn that. Give me the data. Even if they had to wait for 2 or 3 weeks for it. So that was the first step. We take Google Analytics 360 and especially Google Analytics, and we implemented a self-serve approach. So it's like, you want your data? There you have it. It's really easy. You watch 3 videos on YouTube, you know how to use it. It's it. I mean, it's not like that. We also did trainings. We did a lot of enablement for our colleagues. And actually, we saw an immediate effect. So I don't know, how many of you get questions like, how many users did we have last month? We did, a lot. And it was like, come on, a company the scale of Zalando, we cannot have like this, not smarter, but the more, let's say, expert people in analytics answering such questions every now and then, or even like every day. So with Google Analytics, a self-serve approach, we solved that. So people now know how to get how many pages they get, what's the bounce rate of their page, how many users they got, different countries and so on. Oh, what's my split between mobile and desktop? There you have it. You don't need to ask us anymore. Of course, we also built like a few dashboards and so on, but that really helped a lot. But the self-serve approach was actually not enough. There were a few questions that were still managed centrally and that still generated bottlenecks. For instance, what are my KPIs? That's a question that probably you get as well, and we still get it. What are the tracking requirements? So if those are my KPIs, what do I need to track? How do I build my tracking requirements? What can I do once I know about my KPIs? How can I optimize this? How can I leverage my experimentation, A/B testing? What about complex analysis? You know that with the Google Analytics interface, you get to a certain level if you're not an expert. You still need to need like expert support if you want to do things that are a bit more complex. And then, of course, the unknown unknowns. So what is in the data that we don't know about and that can really mean an opportunity for Zalando in our case? So those things were still not solved. So we were thinking, okay, what are we going to do? And we took a look again to our structure, okay? This is very centralized. To give you a bit more detail, actually this is a bit more what it looked like, because on-site analytics was not just one team, it was actually a bunch of teams. Digital analytics, which is the one that I'm leading right now, but also of course we have like a tracking team that was more like a product team. We had a conversion optimization team, we had an A/B testing team, and all these teams had to have like one-on-one relationships, like individual relationships with all the different other teams in the company, and also among us. The complexity of that was insane. It was very, very hard to actually be aligned completely all the time and not to fall into the backlogs and bottlenecks that we were falling into. So we thought, okay, this is what we have. Let's analyze the situation. How can we do this better? And we, of course, started thinking, okay, what is good about what we have that we could still use, or what is not? And one of the things that we saw was actually quite positive was consistency. So if everybody in the company does analytics in the same way, if we use the same methodology, then of course the numbers are comparable. That's something that is understandable. Of course, we were using the same tracking conventions. So if the add to cart button is tracked in the same way in all the different contexts of the business, of the website or app, it makes things easier. If we had a different event in every place, then forget about it. And of course, KPI definition. How do you find conversion rate? Is it user conversion rate? Is it session conversion rate? Is it when they have a touch point with one page? Is it when they have touch point with one product? So in the end, the questions are popping up or popped up around this. And that was a positive thing of having a centralized setup, that all those things came from the same team or same teams, and everything was aligned and the same for everyone, let's say. What was positive as well? Efficiency. Of course, with a centralized model, things are slightly more efficient. For instance, in terms of knowledge sharing, when we know, oh, this new methodology about doing this analysis, we share it across the team, it was easy. Also, we found these amazing insights that are very helpful for the next analysis we're going to do. Sharing that was very easy. And at the same time, fewer redundancies. We knew that there were like 1 or 2 people taking care of one thing, and no other person in the company was doing the same thing, which is also positive. But there were, of course, clear downsides to this. The main one, which is what triggered the whole discussion, the whole process at Zalando, was scalability. Too many dependencies led to huge bottlenecks, so 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and of course, a backlog. And again, if you need to wait so long, you just don't ask questions and just go with the gut. But besides this, there was also another problem, which was lack of domain knowledge. I'll explain this a little bit better. So if you are you're a team of analysts that are sitting together that have like some contact but little contact with the rest of the company. And then there's the team that is, I don't know, in charge for building the wish list. It comes like, we want to know about this, the performance of this thing, and then probably do an A/B test and so on. Like, okay, onboard me. I don't know what you're talking about. And then that had to happen every single time. Of course, we had certain people that were taking care of the more or less the same topics all the time, but there was a disconnect from the functions. That's what it says there. There was a disconnect from all those functions. So we were not, as analysts, we were not part of the teams that were building and maintaining the website. So that didn't work. And we thought, what if we try a decentralized model? So a decentralized model, I'll give a bit of context about this as well. A decentralized model made a lot of sense back then for Zalando, because at that moment we were implementing, what's the name of this thing? Microservice architecture. You all know what a microservice architecture is, right? Great. Does anybody not know? Okay, one person doesn't know. I'll explain. So a microservice architecture means that all the parts of the website, all the parts of the shop are independent from each other, basically. So in the old times, you make a little change on the product page, you need to redeploy the whole fashion store. With the microservice architecture, like you make a little change, that you just redeploy the product page. That's it. The rest stays untouched. And that of course meant a lot of agility. That meant that we could do iterations much faster. So we thought, like, why not having an analyst in every team? So together with product, design, and engineering, also an analyst. We have like 4 people there. They can do everything on their own, full autonomy, no bottlenecks, no dependencies. Fantastic. We gather a bit of information about this from colleagues and in other companies. We read a lot. We did a lot of research. And of course, we detected a few things. So the first thing is, of course, in terms of domain knowledge is much better, because you have the analyst sitting in all the stand-ups of all those teams. You have them like aware of everything that's going on. So it's like, okay, we need to know, we now need to A/B test this. Of course, you don't need to tell them. They know it's gonna happen. We're gonna A/B test that because, I mean, they are aware of the roadmap and so on. As well, of course, the insights were much more relevant. I mean, if you really know what's been done in the past, or could be much more relevant, if you really know what's done in the past, then you know how to build your next analysis and really provide insights that are really meaningful. As well, having cross-functional teams would allow us, or would make possible, to influence the data-driven mindset. Because that happens, I guess in your companies happens as well, like, oh, the data guy will take care of the numbers. We don't care about all those things. And that's something that needs to change. I think that everybody in the company needs to be aware, at least of the main KPI of the team. And having like a person embedded, like a person put in every team, we thought like, that's probably beneficial for that. And we can be a bit of evangelizers and like being like, data, look at your KPI, this is your dashboard, and influence that mindset in the company. Besides that, as mentioned, team autonomy would increase because you don't depend from anybody, and faster iterations. So again, you don't depend from anybody. You don't need to wait for anyone to do things. You can try one thing, measure, optimize, measure again, great. Optimize again, measure again, much faster. But there were risks as well. And the main risk that we heard about was fragmentation. And fragmentation involves different analysis methodology. So if I analyze certain things in a way and the other team who I'm not talking to is analyzing things in the other way, then how can we really compare our numbers? That was, of course, a challenge. Same thing with measurement conventions. If I know a case of a company that has this model, and they just decide in every single team how they track things. So it's like, nah, we'll implement this event like this. A different team implements events in a different way. It's like, how does that work? How does that work? It works for them. They're actually very successful. But for us, we thought it's too much risk. And as well, we had the risk of competing goals. So if one team is optimizing for conversion rate and the other team is optimizing for retention, we have conflicts, definitely. So besides that, and this is kind of an obvious one, what we also wanted to avoid as one of the risks of the decentralized model was the creation of silos, right? Information silos. So teams not talking to each other, redundancies, so same thing being done, same analysis being done in parallel in a few teams, and of course, knowledge management. The cooler insights that you found, the super cool insights that you found, nobody knows about them but your most immediate team. Not ideal. So we went back to the drawing board, like, what should we do? Centralize, decentralize, what's better? And then, ta-da, we had this idea. I mean, it's not that we had this idea. There are many companies who do that as well. But we went for the approach of the center of excellence. So center of excellence is just a hybrid. It's a hybrid approach, which combines both things, the best of the two worlds. I move aside so you can take pics. Basically, what it means is that we created the product analytics department, again, because we're talking about on-site analytics, and our main goal, although not only goal, is to support product development. And the product analytics department embedded or included all the different teams that we had before, plus this one that is new, economics. I won't tell, well, if you're interested, I can tell you what they do. But basically, testing, analytics, tracking, and economics are the core of the product analytics department. And depending from the product analytics department, we have what we call the embedded structure, which is this one. And that means that our company is split mainly in 4 parts, or not the company, but the fashion store, the Zalando fashion store is split in 4 parts. One of them being supply and demand, which is buying and selling, so marketing and category management. Then we have what we call Inspire and Engage, which is what faces the customer, or what the customer can see and can experience online. Then we have search and personalization, which is all the part that is a bit more data-driven and that creates this experience that the customer doesn't really see but does experience. And then we have the last part, which is convenience. Convenience, it's all about the post-purchase experience. So logistics, even the checkout part is part of it, but logistics, delivery, returns, all those things. So that's how things are split. And what we said is, okay, let's define one person from the product analytics team that will be in charge for each of those areas. This is a simplification, by the way. There are many more teams in each area. And in each of the teams that depend from this area, let's embed one analyst that will work with this setup that we were looking at before, together with design, engineering, and product. Easy, right? It took some time to actually get here. But what we see, and this is what we have at the moment, is that it actually is working. And we see an immense change, like a huge change compared to what we had before. What the central teams are doing, if you're wondering, I'm probably going super fast, right? Yeah, 20 minutes, wow. What the central teams are doing mostly is defining the framework for all the other analysts to work within. That means we define the strategy for analytics. We define guidelines and conventions, so how you're supposed to track things, how are you supposed to analyze things, how are you supposed to build your A/B testing approach, how are you supposed to whatever. So there are clear guidelines, so the results of all those teams that we were talking about before are comparable in the end and repeatable. So also documentation is part of the central teams, of the responsibilities of the central teams. We provide tooling. I'll talk about that later. So the Google stack, actually, so Google Analytics, BigQuery, Google Analytics Suite, BigQuery, are responsibility of the central teams. We provide enablement, which is training, so people actually know how to do such things. It's not enough to have the guidelines, but you also need to train people. If you want to have 600 people using Google Analytics, you really need to tell them what is right and what is wrong. So typical question, Why can't I combine I don't know, user scope dimension with a product scope dimension? We get that a lot, and we tell them quite often. And of course, one more responsibility of the central teams is supporting overarching functions. So if you go back here, this is the structure of the fashion store, but Zalando is a bit bigger than this. So at Zalando, we also have legal, we have the management board, we have, I don't know, investor relationships. We have a bunch of teams that are not explicitly part of the fashion store, but still part of the company. And that's what we support from the central team as well. So we make sure that what we communicate to investors, for instance, or what we communicate to the management board is, let's say, curated by us in a way. And what is the function of the embedded structure then? So the embedded structure actually are the more operational part of our department. They support data-informed decisions, which means they do analysis so decisions can be made, basically. Like, we went away, and actually that's something that I've seen, and I'm really amazed, from days like, well, we're going to do that because I have a good feeling about this. It's not that it happened a lot, but it happened. Now it doesn't happen anymore. We also have like a, this may be not so interesting for you, but we have like a internal format where we review each of the products every quarter. And we say, okay, how's the product doing? And we check a few things. Before, there were like 3-4 KPIs in each of those reviews. Now it's 10, 15, 20 KPIs that are looked for every single product. And this is possible only because of the embedded structure, because we have people who are making this possible. Before, I don't know, product managers, engineers were too busy to actually, okay, we need more KPIs, So this is really working. Then the embedded structure is also in charge for optimization. It's not enough to know what's happening, what's going on. It's more important than that to say, what can we do about it? How can we make it better? And that's what the embedded teams are doing. So A/B testing is responsibility of the embedded teams. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button. And then the part that is also one of my favorites, which is data literacy. So what does bounce rate mean? What is the difference between bounce rate and exit rate? You know that. So many people don't. And we have to explain that many times. Or, I don't know, that's just a silly example, but in the end, this educational role of the analyst is very, very important if we want to really achieve this data-informed culture across the whole organization. So those are, let's say, the main responsibilities of the embedded structure. All clear, right? It's crystal clear. Great. That is only possible because of the usage of the Google Analytics stack, of the Google stack. In the end, what we have is a very specific approach about the different tools that we have and we use them for very specific purposes. So, as it says here, different tools for different needs. So Google BigQuery, Analytics, and Data Studio. Start with Data Studio. Data Studio, as you know, data visualization and reporting. There's no more than that, but it's actually very helpful. It's like really snackable, really consumable. It's very easy for our stakeholders to use Data Studio to get their numbers. Then Google Analytics for data exploration, and of course, analysis and reporting. I mean, you are not going to be building a dashboard for every single question that you get. You can just do some easier reports. You know that. But of course, BigQuery I think I wouldn't say it's the most used tool, but it's one of the most heavily used in terms of hours put into it. And we use BigQuery for all the deep dive analysis. We use BigQuery a lot for reporting automation. So the scripts run and then just update Data Studio. So like the connection between BigQuery and Data Studio is very, very close. We don't do that much connecting Data Studio to analytics directly. So it's mostly BigQuery fitting into Data Studio. And actually, BigQuery is also like the backbone of a lot of systems, of a lot of services that we built internally. To give you an example, we don't use Optimize. We don't use anything similar to that because we built our own A/B testing solution. And we built it like 3 years ago. So when Optimize came out, it was a bit too late. No hard feelings, I hope. And this A/B testing solution in the end is just a system that steers the traffic to the different versions that we have. But it does not have any, let's say, analytical functionality. What our tool does is just, okay, we send the users to the different versions that exist. We track everything with Google Analytics. We export all that data into BigQuery daily, or even with, right now it's immediate streaming, is with data streaming. And the results of this are analyzed automatically with automation, with like these scripts that we have, and then show real time what the results of the A/B test or the tests that are running are on a special monitor that we built. So in the end, we may change the skin to it. So we may change, we may build things on top of it, but let's say the guts of all the machinery that we use for all that is still Google. And to be honest, it works really nicely, really, really nicely. I'm very happy about it. So compared to previous experiences in previous jobs, that's a different story. As well, I don't know, I could just talk forever here. But what we are trying right now, for instance, is server-to-server integration of Google Analytics. And that is also helping us a lot on the testing side, but also with data quality. No, come on. I mean, am I so boring? Really? Are you back? Okay, it's back. Anyway, but as well, we have different tools for different needs, but as well, we have different tools for different profiles. So, of course, I won't send BigQuery export to the executives or to the middle management because it's like, won't even read it. For that, we have Data Studio. Simple dashboards with the KPIs that they care about, which are, I mean, not so simple anymore. That's what they use. Then, of course, we have Google Analytics for kind of this middle layer for marketing, design, UX product that they just want to get their numbers quickly. There isn't any dashboard that answers their questions, so they just use Google Analytics. We train them how to use it. For instance, I got a message earlier today, like, can you please tell me the split of users of the homepage between the different countries and different devices? Like, yeah, I'd already told you, check the email I sent you. Oh, great, solved. And then BigQuery, of course, is mostly used by our analysts. So to be honest with you, our analysts rarely use Google Analytics. They're mostly on the BigQuery part. And of course, data scientists and engineering. I mean, okay, I should actually give a nuance here. They do use Google Analytics, our analysts, but mostly when the consumer is a different person. So not for themselves. If they're just doing an analysis, they're exploring the data themselves, they usually use BigQuery. And as I mentioned before, connected to Data Studio. So to show the numbers to others if they're interested. Questions so far? I just fear I'm running through the time. And then, well, we can have another break. Anyway,
excuse me?
Sure.
Can you show us 10 KPIs you're using for a typical product?
10 KPIs that we are using for what product? It depends on the product.
Outfittery.
Sorry?
Outfittery.
Outfittery is our competitor. For Zalando. To be honest, Zalando is like the Zalando version of Outfittery, and I'm not aware of all the KPIs that they use because they have their own team that is not so much connected to us. But I can give you a couple ones that I know that we're using. So for instance, conversion rate. No, actually our main KPI at Zalando is revenue per user. It's revenue per user. That's our main KPI. That we use that for everything. No matter what we're doing, revenue per user is always there. So to be sure that we are not breaking anything, that we're not hurting the business, if we're going wild and we try something that for sure will have like not a very good financial result, revenue per user is always there. But besides that, I would say the most important ones are conversion rate per user, of course. We use click-through rates for some context, of course, mostly for catalog and recommendation optimization. So what's the click-through rate? But not only, what's the conversion for that? And for that, actually, we use the functionality of the enhanced e-commerce, so the product list attribution. That's kind of the ground, the foundation of our attribution calculations as well. I mean, we are working on that to make it a bit more sophisticated, but that's key for everything we do. I mean, of course, if you tried Zalando, I'll go for you now. If you try Zalando, you know that you can check, okay, you see a product, you see it on catalog, you click on it, you see it. Maybe you put it on your wish list or not. And then you go to a wish list and you have there, oh, yeah, nice, you see it again. But maybe you don't buy it. And then you're like browsing again and you see it in a recommendation. And oh, cool. And then you click it and you buy it. Who wins? What of the three, let's say, contexts triggered your purchase? And that's where we are trying to crack right now. So, of course, we're using the product list attribution, which is last click. But that's not enough for us. And that's what we're looking at the moment. Besides that, I could tell you retention. So we have 7-day retention, 30-day retention, and 60-day retention for all the different features. So we analyze if users that are in contact with something come back or not. I don't know what else I could tell you. Engagement. That's my favorite. Like, can you please tell me the engagement of my feature? It's like, can you please define engagement? And we're also working on that. So we have different definitions of engagement for the different contexts of the website or the app. What else do we have? Those sound like very classic, all of them, right? Well, we have all the KPIs which are not directly available in Google Analytics, but for us, it's very, very important, which is return rate. So for Zalando, that's a big challenge to actually, I mean, it's a USP of Zalando, and I think it's key of the success of Zalando. Come on. It's key of our success that users can return their goods if they don't want with no hassle. But of course, that's something that hurts the business in the long run. So we need to account for that. And that's it's a KPI that we monitor with Google Analytics. We don't have it because we don't track returns with GA. It's coming from our backend systems, but we combine it. And actually, not in Data Studio, but we had some very nicely put reports built on Google spreadsheets that were pulling data from BigQuery and pulling data from our backend systems to account for the return rate of the different things that we were doing. The problem with that, of course, is the return rate. I think we have 100 days that you can return an item, so you have to wait 100 days to actually calculate return rate. That wasn't great, but still, it's fine. Also, for all the A/B testing, we also account for that. Okay, we have a new feature, or we have an improved feature that makes things easier for the customer to buy, so it's like more impulse buying. But of course, we need to account for people regretting the decision and sending things back. So we have to wait all those days until we see the real impact of the things that we test. Is that enough? You want more? We can follow up later. Maybe I can remember some more. You were before. Now we go for you. Tell me.
That's actually just the timing alone. You mentioned revenue per user. That's most important to you. But what time frame? Per year, per month, per week, per what?
Depends on the time frame we're looking at. In the end, it depends. So if we're looking at an A/B test that has been running for, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks, then we look at that time plus 100 days of the returns, and then we look what the revenue per user for the period is. And we don't have like a clear no, it's not a fixed term for that calculation. It depends on what we're looking at. I mean, of course, if we're seeing, okay, what's your year on year, so how much better we're doing, so we look at the full period. But it's not fixed, and it really depends on what we're looking at. You were after, then you go, Jan. You go before.
So you said that you decided on one definition, like KPIs, for example, conversion rate. You take sessions from visitors. And now, who is now deciding what definition is the one used in the company? Is it then the centralized
Central teams, exactly.
Team, together with marketing, or just?
Sure. I mean, we
okay.
exactly. We listen to our
How
stakeholders.
do you make sure that this one definition will be used through all?
That's a very fair question.
Teams, because one internal wiki page wouldn't do it.
We rely a lot on documentation, although as you said, it's not always enough.
Yeah.
We have a quite strict 4i principle, so every analysis that goes out needs to be checked by another analyst, at least one more analyst. And I strongly encourage all the teams to actually run that through the central team. So it doesn't need to be through the central team. It can be another embedded analyst that checks it. But I encourage people to, I don't want to say to check it myself, but at least someone from my team or from the teams that are centrally located to take a look at that. Of course, like being 100% sure that all the policies, that all the guidelines are enforced is impossible. Yeah. And there's always like, who did that? Come on. And yeah, there's always a bit of like putting off fires and clearing things after some people, but in general, it works quite nicely. Yeah, tell me.
What was your most surprising learning from the transition from a centralized to a center of excellence structure?
Good question. When you say good question, it's because you don't have an answer. You know that, right? What surprised me most is actually to see that our stakeholders are really interested in using data and pulling it, and that indeed, if they were not using it more before, it was because they were not enabled to do it. They didn't have like a sparring partner to ask, hey, can you please help me pulling that? And now that we have this embedded structure that analysts are kind of like closer to everybody, I see a lot of people talking data. And I have like, I don't know, engineers coming up to me and like, oh, well, that KPI is it now because this analyst like told me about it. I think that we could even improve it. It's like, wow, I never had that before. So that, I think that this more like evangelizing feature of the analyst, like that capability, I think is working, and I'm very surprised to see that it's working. Because for me, it was sort of like a bet that we had, like, okay, we go that way, it may happen, and it's happening. So that's something that is, for me, is like really nice. Of course, I mean, seeing that the product teams like test much faster, that make decisions much faster, and so on, that's also very nice, especially for the business. But from a, let's say, personal point of view, it's to see how people are actually interested in data. And then just by having someone by them that can support them a little bit and guide them, like the usage of it and the interest of it increases like hugely. So I would say that one. More questions were over there, right? No?
How do you do it with backups? Because when you have one big centralized team with like 25 analysts, then I think it's like PTOs, long sick leaves. I mean, then you're like kind of safe. When you have like one or two in each team, how do you do it with PTOs and sick leaves?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. Sorry.
Vacation.
Vacation. Yeah. That's a very good one. In the end, thanks for the explanation. I was not getting the jargon. We support each other in the end. So even if we are like embedded in different teams, we try to keep it as a family, and that's something I will mention later. So we support each other. And for instance, right now I have one of the analysts in my team that is embedded in one of the teams. He's going on a sabbatical for 1.5 months, and then all the other analysts are challenge before. It's like me and like the main analyst there, but still junior, so she needs support, and there's like all the other analysts are helping with such things. Also, when I go on vacation, it's like, okay, don't send me emails, talk to these people while I'm away, and then we just support each other. Indeed, that's one of the challenges. You don't have, I mean, at the moment, we don't have enough people to say, okay, no matter what happens, have a rooster there of people that can always like jump in if someone's missing. But we'll get there, hopefully, at some point. Tell me.
How do you document or spread your guidelines? Is there kind of your intranet or whatever?
Yeah, we have, I mean, we use the Jira stack for that, and that Confluence is part of it. And even though people don't really like it, we're making our best effort to have the best user experience on our Confluence pages, and everything's documented there. It's easily searchable and so on. And also at Zalando, we have, I'm not sure if this is like inside information, probably not. We have sort of like a kind of a Facebook-like solution for internal communications, where you have your own profile of yourself. There's like the profiles of the different teams, and you can even create like different groups based on different interests. And we have one for BigQuery, we have one for Google Analytics, and then anything that is new that needs to be shared is posted there. And in the end, I mean, is it more efficient than email? It's pretty much the same, because if you're part of a group, you get an email notification that something has been added, but at least it stays there forever, right? So it's like, oh, there was something there, and you can go there and search it. So it works sort of like a Facebook for business, kind of. I mean, it's not even Facebook nor even related. But it works similarly. So we use the two approaches. So Confluence on the one side, and then this other tool to announce with the new content, actually. That's what we use. And as well, I mean, I'm speaking it, you know, text stand-ups and whatever is happening. Like we have like alignments like every 2 weeks. There's like a meeting that we call it like product analytics exchange. And then there you go on stage and you explain about the newer things and so on. We also do that quite a lot. And I'm personally all the time there on stage. More questions? I can continue that. Oh, one more question, tell me.
In your experience, what is the amount of people blocking Google Analytics tracking?
Blocking?
You changed from WebTrack to Google Analytics.
Oh,
so
WebTrack.
I guess more people blocking the tracking.
Yeah, I don't have a number right now. It really depends on the markets. I remember the last year we were looking at that, and we saw that in Spain, if I'm not wrong, it was around 10-15% of our users were using an ad blocker. But I'm talking off the top of my head, so it's probably a wrong number, but it was something around that. We've done an extensive research on that last year, I remember, and we aligned that with some numbers that we got from Google as well. They were sort of public, and they were more or less at the same levels as what Google reported. So probably that I'm not sure if that report is public or not, but in the end, there's a lot of users using ad blockers.
Do the stakeholders accept it? How do you think of it?
That's a very good question, but that's actually a question that I got on my very first day, not even at Zalando, but at my previous job at Rocket. Like, why do my numbers from Google Analytics don't match, or why they do not match my numbers from my database? And my answer is just like, I can tell that while I sleep. It's like, because they will never match. And it's the way it is. That's the nature of web analytics. Web analytics is never accurate and will never be. Because how the technology is built, it will never be accurate. You will never have the total 100% representation of reality. It's just part of it. Live with it. I'm sorry. And that's what I tell them all the time. Some people take it, some people don't take it, but that's the way it is. I mean, probably you get the same questions quite often. But my approach is like, why fight it? I mean, it's the way it is. It will never be better than that. I mean, it can be better than that. And that's what we are, as we mentioned before, we're going towards server-to-server integration. With server-to-server integration, you avoid like, I don't know, ad blockers, and you avoid all other problems that you have. But now with GDPR, you start also like removing all the people who don't want to be tracked. So in the end, we will never have like 100% representation of reality. That's what I usually say. And if they don't like it, they can go ask someone else and they will get the same answer. So it's the way it is. Okay, I'll continue. There's just a few more slides, so you can go for another coffee soon. What works of this setup? I already mentioned a few things, but actually what we saw that really works is analytics at scale. So finally we can do analytics in every single team, which is reflected in faster iterations. So you find an insight, you implement what the insight is telling you, you can measure again, optimize again, and so on and so on. And that is really, really different to what it was before. And then, of course, end-to-end responsibility. So what I was mentioning before is here. All these functions actually are owned in every team by the analyst. So this analyst is responsible for the testing roadmap, is responsible for the analytics itself, is responsible for tracking and so on, in alignment with the central teams, of course, but they are responsible for all of it, which means that there's an end-to-end responsibility about analytics. So one person with the team can take care of the whole cycle of analytics, which from my point of view is fantastic. But of course, there are certain challenges. Remember this face? Schrei vor Glück, glaube ich. What are our challenges? As mentioned before, knowledge sharing. We were talking about before. So having like a central documentation and having regular meetings and regular presentations about what we're doing and the insights that we found and so on is not always enough. If someone doesn't want to listen, we'll never listen. So knowledge sharing is still a bit of an issue, a bit of a challenge that we have to get better at. Change management. You will say, why change management? A lot of people, mostly the ones that were working in the central teams, at some point were saying, okay guys, now we have a different structure. You need to move to an embedded structure. So we need to change the way that we work. And for some people were like, fantastic, I really want to take it. But for some other people, it was like, and that take some time to actually convince or to, reformulate the team, let's put it like that, so it actually fit the expectations or the new size, the new shape of the department. And one that for me is a big pain is staffing. Because at the moment that you want to have one analyst in every team, you need to hire a lot of analysts. And hiring analysts, as you know, is one of the hardest things on earth. Because if either they don't have the right skills, or they do and they ask him for an insane amount of money because there's a competitor that is offering an insane amount of money, or I don't know, they have like different, I mean, you are analysts as well, so you know how it is. When you are in high demand and there's relatively low supply, you can actually ask for a lot of things, and Zalando, unfortunately, cannot always offer such things. So staffing, I can tell you, is a real pain. And getting everybody in place for all the different positions that we have open is taking much longer than expected. And it's taken many hours of my life. Too many. I mean, it's not a bad thing to do, to talk to nice people, interesting people, and exchange. You also sort of create a network. But honestly, it's just too much effort sometimes. Especially when you have like 4 interviews, one person like, okay, this is the candidate, like, yeah, I'm going for another option. They're like, okay.